I think we can both agree that there are situations where people are being misclassified as independent contractors, just to sort of skirt the laws, on employment, or sometimes immigration, or but that, I think, for me, I think that having the older standard of legal analysis for an independent contractor doesn't prevent anyone from being able to enforce those laws nonetheless, even without the ABC test.
Yeah, absolutely. And my examination into it, even as a non-lawyer, is a lot of the standards that we have in place, they work, they're just not properly enforced. So if someone is really engaging in an egregious abuse of worker misclassification, the laws that are already in the books can be enforced and you punish those employers. Simple as that. But to create new standards where everyone will be presumed to be an exploiter of workers. Every employer is going to be assumed, unless they present evidence that they're not, if they have to be subjected to an ABC test, for instance. That creates so much confusion. And in California, let's say for this instance of why they targeted first Lyft and Uber, they thought the law would they billed it as the law just going after these horrible companies. But what we saw with the law going into effect, it actually affected full-time freelancers, florists, translators, journalists. A lot of journalists in California and freelance writers who were writing high dollar type articles and content, they were capped at 35 articles per publication. And some people hit that threshold in a month. So they would essentially make a year's worth of their salary in a month under the new law. So a lot of journalists were very upset, rightfully so. And you see like bakers and even, like you said, IC lawyers. You could see lots of people, highly skilled white collar professionals are now starting to enter the freelance economy because they just don't like what's happening in their workplace. I think the workplace has become too politicized. A lot of people also realize the limitations of their industries. For me, I realized I couldn't move up in the political industrial complex, as I call it, not because I couldn't compete. I applied to many different places. It just felt like opportunities were scarce unless you had a connection through your parents. You somehow had to maybe not be as outspoken or something. So there were certain biases against you if you weren't somehow connected, or if you weren't like a preference point. And this is just my sinister thinking of certain things. But it was really hard to make your mid-level career step for me. And I've heard this from many others who've talked to me privately and said, to work in politics, to find your mid-level career, unless you're creating a business or consultant shop, and I do consulting too, because that's how I make most of my money. I would be poor if I just simply relied on writing on a freelance basis, but that is a big chunk of what I do. I noticed that, when you're limited in your industry or your field, and that's what a lot of people are feeling now. I was just kind of on the, I would say not cutting edge, because there are many people who've been freelancing a lot longer than me. In terms of millennials freelancing, I would say I'm one of the early cases of millennials going into this full-fledged. And I'm not alone. There are millions of other millennials and even Gen Zers. This is actually a very popular option among younger generations, our generation and those behind us. And we see that the traditional 9-to-5 job is not really amenable to our interests. We want to have freedom to choose who we work with. We want greater flexible options so we can take time off and not only just have 2 weeks of vacation. I can have more vacation time if I want, because I determine the schedule. I determine everything that I do. Certainly, like, different clients that I have are like, can you at least fulfill basic responsibilities with us? And I'm like, yeah, I will. And then obviously I'm in control of those duties, even though we work together mutually in our contract for me to fulfill certain things. But I'm in control of what I do, and I fulfill tasks asked of me if it's required of me to do so.